host back, Shajay Bhooshan, Associate Director at Zahadid Architects and co-founder of Zaha Code. He has been personally a huge inspiration to me because his forefront in all the cutting edge technologies, right from digital fabrication to participatory design, game engine, metaverse, now AI. So uh, I'm very grateful to host you back on the show, Sajay.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Happy to be back.
So, everyone who I know in my circle always wants to know what is Zaha using with the latest tools and technology. How is Zaha leveraging AI? We see so many mid-journey prompts using Zaha. So, for people who are listening to this for the first time, can you give a bigger picture of how Zaha is leveraging AI in the design workflows?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with any new technology that is society is experimenting with, like whether it's immediately relevant to architecture or not, we are very much want to engage with it and try and understand it, and that's what we are also doing along with many others. Um, Knowing fully well that it's open ended, like we don't have neither the immediate deep understanding of like what all the systems are like, and nor do we know exactly where to apply it, like so like everything else, or most other technologies like which are new. I mean, of course AI is not new, but like this new form, text to image and text to text kind of prompting, LLMs, is new in its latest incarnation. And so what we did was like work with I think around 2020, 2022, we started with a artistic collaboration with Refik Anadol, because that's we find art and spatial sculpture and these kind of avenues are good spaces to experiment. So and that so we did a collaborative experiment, an exhibition called Architecting the Metaverse, which combined two things that we were particularly new and maybe very congenial, right? Like so we wanted to try and understand like how these things can be applied in the service of design, or you know. So that's what we did. Like, and Rafiq, as everybody knows, has been experimenting with this for a long time, and so that's how we got started. This was pre DALI 2, like DALI 2 beta was not even out, like, but Rafiq had somehow access to it, and through his connections with NVIDIA and OpenAI and so on, and Patrick got very excited when we first started seeing that he could type in prompts and like images would come out, like which are surprisingly like our buildings, like and so then we extended the collaboration like for 2 3 months and made an exhibition about all of that. And since then we've been experimenting with various forms of text to image and LLM technologies and tools that come out. So yeah, whether it's Midjourney or or like training our own LoRa training of stable diffusion models, and but also like trying to see how to extract architectural outcomes from it, right? Like, so we're doing this workshop next week, actually, starting in Digital Futures, physical workshop in Tongji, trying to see how to get architecturally relevant uh, and coherent outcome. So we're trying to we observe that, like, these image generation things don't have much tectonic understanding. So we're like, how can we give it some tectonic understanding so that the output is like somewhat tectonically relevant? Like, for example, like columns don't end midway through before reaching the ground, and a bridge has like different kinds of footings and so on. So so that's where we are at, spaces of experimenting with the technology, starting as always with artistic and collaborative experimentation. This time it happened to be with Refik Anadol, but like we're also working alongside the metaverse side of experimentation, which is like, we're working with Fortnite, and like we previously did a game with PUBG Mobile. We launched Metatopia, which is aiming to be a kind of virtual hub for all designers to showcase what they can do in the virtual world, but also experiment with the medium of the metaverse. So we do think, like, like at some point, like AI will need to be applied, and applied maybe at slightly larger scale than singular offices, like to see what the outcome might be. And so the metaverse is a good sandbox to try that out, before maybe something of that percolates into the physical world. Yeah.
Damn, like you mentioned so many exciting projects in this one answer. Like I'm curious to know, how do you keep up to date with the latest technological updates, and how do you tinker about, okay, this is the cutting edge tech, this is architectural design and domain problems, and how do you translate that into workflows and prototypes?
Yeah, I mean, I think like since the beginning, like the company, Zaha always said that like there should be no end to experimentation, and so we genuinely believe that, and we experiment like with. I mean, we by no means like we aim to like keep up to date with everything that's going on, like, which is next to impossible, and we also don't want to dilute our focus outside of architecture, right? That and so like whilst we're working on many projects, like as the company grows, we see more and more projects. That's uh, so like the fit between experimental topics and research and domain applications, like somehow naturally come about, like because we see so many projects. So sometimes it's master plan, sometimes it's tower, sometimes it's museums and so on, like, or modular construction and so on, like these kind of things, like we we use those also as testing grounds, because no client wants to be the guinea pig, right? Like, so we don't like directly try with projects untested technology, like, because it doesn't even, like, any client will see through that, like, and it's also not ethically, not something that we wouldn't want to jeopardize what, as a company, our brand stands for. So we take things very slow, like lots of, some of the experimentation happens with students
Mm.
in places we teach. Sometimes it happens in collaborative experimentation, like I mentioned, Refik Anadol, and sometimes we collaborate with like more experts, like in universities or startups and so on, who have the intellectual and maybe also intellectual, technical, and financial resources to do more in-depth stuff, in-depth research. So yeah, like, so that's how we keep up to date, through collaborations and having a dense network of collaborators in industry, in university, is extremely critical. And also we try to teach, and finding mappings into the application world is again, it's a long-term process. We take it little baby step, one pavilion here, and then a few more art or sculpture, like furniture scale applications, and then slightly bigger things and slightly bigger things, and like, maybe there's a pilot project like 4 or 5 years later, and then another 3 or 4 years later, like, you do few more pavilions, and then, or technology demonstrator projects, and hopefully some of that then makes its way into the bigger buildings.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's not like it's not a linear pathway, and it's not like the tech industry where, like, we have a roadmap and say we're gonna invest millions, which no architecture firm has. and then we'll make a product and then try to sell the product. That's usually not how architecture works, right? So
I see. It's great workflows and collaborative system or a ecosystem of partners you have that allows and they're open for those ideas. We have a question from AP. Like, how do you
hmm
distinguish between hype and real long-term potential projects while researching cutting-edge tech?
yeah, I mean, I think with any technology, like particularly like as architects, we wouldn't know the deep underlying ways to recognize what is actually genuine and not. But there is ways like to identify which of the experts are genuine, right? Like, and so that's outside of with any topic, like, you know, you we try to identify collaborators who are like in it for the long term, like they didn't just hop onto it like yesterday, right? Like, and also we tried collaborators who resonate with us, or we resonate with the collaborators, because it's always collaboration is mutual, is only if you're sincere, right? Like, so the kind of people we want to resonate with, and kind of people who resonate with us are people who are genuine and are in it for the long term. Like, you know, they're, you know, they continue to explore the topic whether it's in the news or not, and then so that's how we, you know, so we don't have any immediate, you know, FOMO. Like, so although we do believe that, like, when society is invested into a trend, like, we should participate as much as possible,
Mm,
because there is something to be learned even in that, like, because like a lot of things will be said, and like a lot of things will come out, and which is great. Like, if 100 things come out, like two of them is likely to be genuine, right? Like, and so,
mm,
or have like deeper future trajectories, like, and so yeah, that's why we definitely need to be clued in to societal trends, but like we're not following it for the hype. Like, it's in the hope of discovering that the hype brings out the genuine people also,
I
and
see.
genuine collaborators that we can build up a longer term relation. So, you know, Philip Block and like the Block Research Group, like they've not said a single word about AI, like, but like they've laid the foundations of digital geometry, and like making it structural, you know, the structural geometry more accessible to designers, and so in the previous hype, let's say, it was digital fabrication and computational geometry and architectural geometry and so on, like maybe more than 15 years ago. And so in that hype, like, we discovered Philip, and that was, you know, the rest is history. I did
I
my
see.
PhD with him, and we did many collaborations, and like there's a deep congenial relationship between Patrick and Philip, and ZHA and Block Research Group and so on. Yeah. So we hope to do the same with every serial specialization, right? Like, because for, yeah, like same with robotic fabrication, you know, like we eventually, uh, it so happened that Philippe was also became the director of the NCCR in Switzerland, and like, but that was only later, like early on, like Alicia and myself, like when we didn't even have a robot, like in London, we discovered, actually Alicia discovered, Odiko, like Asbjorn and Yele, and like, you know, and then again through like collaborations and pavilion making and workshops, like, we did quite a few workshops with Asbjorn, and then we came to know about Yele. So, and then we got into that network of robotic fabrication, EAC, in Barcelona. Yeah, so we like to participate, make our way, uh, use the hype to find the relevant scientific literature, the key people in the domain, and not only key people today, but like, you know, does it track back to something a century earlier, right? Like, you know, so when people can write about it coherently, So I think those. So these are all ways like where you can identify what is hype and what is not, even without being an expert in the domain. Yeah.
Mm, that's a great insight. And earlier you mentioned about like in your upcoming workshop, like column validation or for bridges using AI. Uh, from your experience, like with this LLMs and diffusion models, what are the things they have learned very well, and what are the things which still requires our domain knowledge to fine tune or train on?
Yeah, I mean, I think like somehow I don't fully understand like all the ins and outs of these. I have only a kind of curious AI curious person level of knowledge and understanding. And but what we have noticed through a lot of experimentation, like what is great about text to image, is that a, a lot of it has learned a lot of relationships between what people are doing and what the space around them are. Like, so if you type in auditorium, it will already place people in a certain arrangement, right? Like, and that's, if you think about it, like that's fundamentally missing in most CAD applications. There are no people, like, and then people are positioned by people, like in the rendering companies, and they usually get that all kind of wacky and wrong. And so that's something like that, surprisingly not much is spoken about that, like, but it's a genuinely great way to think of, imagine how your space will be used, because ultimately that's what architectural design is about, right? Like, can your spaces support contemporary use, like of different kinds of activities that can take place. And so that's a great uh, something that like somehow is inherent in these uh, image databases, that it like it, or however it's learned it. And and also, of course, because of the way diffusion works, like, or convolution works, and reverse process of it potentially works in the same way, I guess, is like local pixel to pixel relationships, right? Like one pixel to its neighborhood. So in that sense, it's very good at, if you draw in uh, one table, it can draw stuff around it, right? Like it's the same way, if you draw a foot of a column, it can then start drawing stuff. But like the longer that range goes, like the coherency starts dropping, right? Like, so if the column then meets like an arch that like bifurcates, like for sure it will get all the brick patterns wrong, right? Like,
Mm,
and because because it is fundamentally just like patching together the big image, like region by region. And so that's what it can do well. And like with most learning processes, the greatest strength is also one of its greatest weaknesses, like that it cannot really know long range relationships, like uh, bet- so, but it can still quite get a long way, like, because ultimately you could piece together larger pieces of the puzzle, starting at like the foot and like going, if there's enough information, like then that in its learning base, that that it could potentially create more and more coherent outcomes. And um, yeah, and then it's like, I mean, one of the things like that we discovered, like just intuitively now working on this, trying to teach AI is like some kind of tectonic logic. I mean, image AIs, they don't even have 3D information, but just the image coherence of the image, um, is is to say, if like we can do LoRa training with parametrically produced 3D model and take many different views,
mm,
like for photorealistically rendered views, or creates the synthetic data base of images, like a training, small fine tuning training set, like 100, 200 images, then it begins to get better, right? Like, and so that's, so there is already, you start with AI rendering, and like where just doing some photorealistic rendering, that's a great application, because rendering takes a long time. uh, and the next step before that, next step after that is like, can it learn more tectonic information, and then so on and so on. Like you can build up a larger hierarchy of AI applications. So we say we start with simple AI rendering. So you give it a black and white screenshot, and then it will do some photorealistic rendering. It'll also put people if you want, um, and then you work backwards from the inputs. Like how many of the inputs can you then generate,
I
right?
see.
Like, so if you have to give it a screenshot and a text prompt, and then it will produce a render. Next step is like, can you just somehow synthesize that image also, like the input image? And yeah, so that's how we are exploring it. Like, I mean, we don't know whether that's the right way or wrong way. We don't know, but anyway, it's been productive in that way. Yeah.
I see. And what are the ways you think one could incorporate real world constraints along with this diffusion model? Because the example you shared of auditorium, let's say it got the chairs, but real world has a budget, or like, okay, I want semantic or like vectorized data of how many chairs or what's the spatial availability. So how can we play the best of both worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that like it's what it feels like is like super early days of, it's also not technology that was meant to be used in an architectural sense anyway. From so I don't know how exactly all of the cost and things like it will eventually make its way, but I mean, it's gonna take its own non-linear path. Like, and so I think we are currently just enjoying the process of learning through, trying to apply it, trying to just take baby steps. Like, okay, like it can create these images. Like, can we get it to create better images? And then, yeah, I mean, eventually maybe some of this bleeds into 3D diffusion models. We don't know, but and then once you have 3D, then potentially you could embed cost. I mean, I guess like the way to incorporate cost and other things would be the same way. You give it the training set which
Mm,
has the relevant information, um, but I mean, yeah, like it's, cost or carbon or like any other numerically something that requires calculations, like which which obviously a image diffuser model cannot actually do.
I see.
So it has to be embedded in the training data set one way or the other. But I don't know the mechanics enough, like how best to embed it. Yeah.
Mm, got it. In I was seeing a lot of mid-journey or stable diffusion prompts using Zahadid architects. So there are few artists which these models have learned really well to produce like similar work or a variation of that work. So what are your thoughts when you
Mhm.
type Zaha in mid-journey or diffusion? What part of like of Zaha has its learned style or fluidity? Like, is there any like conversation around that?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, I mean, we internally don't usually use that in the prompting. Like, uh, I mean, yeah, like like Mark Berry, perhaps, like, he was here in our offices like 2 months ago, and he had this interesting insight as to say, like, um, um, AI empowers the amateur, right? Like, or this particular text to
Mhm.
image AI, which is, I think, in itself is a great thing, because like now a lot of people are aware of Gaudi, or like, they become culturally aware of things by needing to use those names or use
Mm,
those keywords or tokens in the in the image generation. And so I think so Zaha Hadid, like in that sense, I think people need want to use that to actually get something futuristic looking,
Yes.
and I don't think like they genuinely mean like exactly like Zaha the architects, or Zaha herself, like which anyway there's only so much image can encode, right? Like there's um, so it only encodes local relations from all the images that it has learned. And I think one reason perhaps why the prompt is famous is because like that prompt leads to more coherent outcomes, like, or novel outcomes, like and the reason it leads to novel outcomes is perhaps because there's a lot of images out there in the internet which kind of auto tagged with Zahid as a name, right? And so yeah, we don't make much of it. Like I mean, it's good to be popular, but it's not like in any way driving our work, right? Like I mean, we are not trying to be popular, or but yeah, but it you know but it is good like that. We're not like worried that like somehow our IP is getting leaked or not, like because there's like images are not IP in that sense.
Mm,
Like clients don't pay us to make images, right? Like we want to create architecture that serves the client's needs, and more importantly the client's needs, right? Like the end users of the buildings, like, and so none of that is in any image anyway. So
nice. And Sajay, earlier you mentioned about like collaboration with researchers, best artists, and big companies. For people who are listening, what are potential collaborations? If they want to do with Zaha, they could reach out to you in what particular discipline or particular areas.
yeah, I mean, we don't have, I mean, we are very open, first of all, like, as I said, if people are, we collaborate, I mean, whether through universities or startups or sometimes artists, like, and, but we are definitely biased towards action, like, like we want to do stuff and then talk about it, right? Like that. And so, yeah, so there needs to be some genuine interest that is mutual, like that we want to explore, and yeah, like then we just then we do it like through how do you say, like you take little steps, like we don't make a giant roadmap and then try to implement it, because that usually never works, because like many people, then bigger the roadmap, like more people need to get involved, and that never works. Like so we start always small, grow from little things, and then eventually leads to larger collaborations, and more and more groups of people could be involved, and I think like that is the best way. Like so we do these workshops, like that is also a way sometimes to collaborate with people who are not in Zadiad architects, like I mean, so this one we are doing by ourselves, but like previously we have done workshops with like Philippe, and sometimes with startups like Robofold, and yeah, so I think yeah, we genuinely want to work, as I said, with people with whom we resonate, like in our underlying ethos of experimentation, but also like mutually, that that they have equal amount of curiosity, but also sincerity towards a particular topic of um, exploration. And then so yeah, I mean, we have done all kinds of things, like purely in the digital, like, or some physical, like so like the collaboration for video game, like the PUBG Mobile, like they approached us to see if we will do a co-branding exercise, like, and immediately we were like, yeah, we're not going to put our name just to do the branding.
Mm.
But if you're genuinely interested, like, we could design something together and then explore and then talk about that, right? Like, and so we we turned a kind of marketing exercise potentially, like, which we have zero interest in, into something like that couldn't be mutually beneficial, where like our discipline of architecture and their profession of game design kind of came together, and they were very open to it, like, which was very surprising, like, because initially, like, the collaboration request came through a marketing company which had nothing to do with Krafton, the producers of PUBG Mobile. Like, but then, like, we said, like, yeah, we need to talk to Krafton, the technical team, and then Krafton put a lot of developers and then artists, and gave us very good feedback on how to design spaces for video games, like, which surprisingly, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I wouldn't say science, but there's a lot of um, intuitive, tacit knowledge in the industry on, like, what make the spaces interesting for gamers, and which in a shooting game was interesting, that, like, you have to hide everything, right? Like, you need places. So it was a kind of inverse design process for us, like, because we tried to make sure that there is optical and acoustic transparency between many spaces in our buildings, like, whereas, like, trying to design this space was inverse, like, you have to have acoustic and optical, how do you say, occlusion
Yeah.
and opacity. So, yeah, and then that was, it triggered a lot of thoughts in our minds on, like, how we could parametricize some of these things, and I mean, and so we explored quite a lot of that. We also gained a lot of knowledge on how to prepare assets to have a low memory footprint, and so it works on mobile and it's easy to download. And so that was genuinely very interesting, and that was, then that's why we think, like, it was a popular video. And I mean, the game was, it was an unranked map, like, it was never meant to be a commercial game, but since then we are now working with Fortnite, like, again, as an experiment, like, nothing to, we don't want to be game design companies, right? Like, but yeah, like, there's, so these kind of collaborations we're very much interested in, like, where there is something that we can work on, like, and then learn something, and potentially, who knows where it's going to lead, like, and so a lot of our metaverse um, speculations and, like, things we write about now, like, or I mean, is informed by these collaborations and experiments.
I see. And for like a startup founder or a student researcher who might be interested, what is one small action item they might do for this kind of potential? Should they email you with a draft? What value can they
Um,
provide? Or
yeah, I mean, like, we are also very approachable. Like, yeah, if there are people interested in, yeah, you can ping me on LinkedIn or email me, or I mean, anybody in the company, actually. Like, I mean, ideally, the more, I mean, this is also how we work. It's not just like me making a decision. Like, I might champion the case internally, but every collaboration, every project, even a commercial project, needs a champion internally, and then, like, others kind of ask tough questions, why we should do this and why not collaborate, why not do other collaborations, like, what is the cost, what is the opportunity cost, like, what are the benefits, like, how long is it going to take, and so on, like, so yeah, so that's how we work anyway, right? Like, so the way into the company is through anybody who's willing to champion your case, and then, yeah, I mean, of course, like, some are better at championing than others, but but there's also only so much about the championing part. Like, if there's genuine merit in the proposed collaboration, then, yeah, like, then most likely we will do it. And also it should be like, like it cannot make lofty claims. Like
Mm,
we just need to be sincere and kind of know how experimental it is, like, and like, by and large, like, nobody in the company is interested in money. Like,
mm,
like, if somebody says like, oh, let's collaborate and we're gonna make 2 million or whatever in one one year, like, yeah, you're like, no. Because, yeah, like, everybody values their time extremely, and like, so they only want to do stuff that are genuinely interesting and, kind of rewarding. And,
mm,
I mean, of course, money is useful, like, as a measure, and because it moves things along, like, and so there needs to be sufficient money, but that's not in itself a goal. uh, like, so some of the collaborations, like, somehow immediately fall through because the external perception of the company is that, oh yeah, we will leverage our brand, and like we will do things to make more money. But I mean, yeah, we want to do good architecture, right? Like, that's, so if it helps us being better designers, like, and make some impact in the physical world or the virtual world, it's high visibility. So these are things that we are very much interested in. Like, it's, so we're not doing things just because they're popular in the world. So sustainability, for example, like, yeah, we will do it, but not if, like, people just keep over promising, like, the impact. So yeah, we want to experiment, like, if there is some kind of zero carbon cement, or like, yeah, we want to try it out, like, we'll definitely try it out. But,
I see.
yeah, yeah, same with AI, and same with any other. Yeah.
So, Sajay, like a lot of people like are now thinking how this AI LLM diffusion gonna impact architectural education. Uh,
Hmm.
are there any things we would change in
Hmm.
the current curriculum or the current way of teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, because like, I also teach at the design research lab for the last, yeah, 19 years now. I notice, that, like, one of the places where AI could help is being a kind of augmented tutor, right? That, because it can, like, even this video, or this like this conversation, like the world of podcasts, and, like, the LLM can learn, from like thousands of places at the same time,
Mhm,
and augment whatever the one topic that has been discussed in studio or in session. And what's interesting is that, therefore, individually, each conversation doesn't need to be like earth shattering, right? Or, like, because AI overall, as long as it's listening to a broad spectrum of things, it will kind of learn, like, the synthesized useful things out of, like, the millions of conversations that it listens to, right? Like, I mean, one of the key things, like the YouTube video summaries,
mm,
it's a great, way, like, that's like, already 2 3 years ago it started coming, and now, like, every meeting can be summarized. Not that, like, I ever read the summary, but just the bullet points already is useful, like,
mm,
to, so that's one useful way that AI can help education, by simultaneously listening to all the relevant things. Like, so, for example, Patrick's, like, magnum opus, two-volume books. It's like literally 80 or 100,000 words. Like, nobody will probably have time to read all of it, but, so, where if you upload it to one of these LLMs and, like, kind of ask it questions, and, so that's the second level of LLMs useful in, education, is that you can ask it questions of attack and questions of inquiry, which are personal, right? Like, it's
mm,
not like, like a website where it's already fixed one person's perspective. Like, I mean, I routinely use ChatGPT now, like to ask questions of like all kinds of things, like how were the canals of Amsterdam funded, or like, or like how long did churches take to build, and did any of that technology make its way into the houses? Like all of these things, which will be very difficult for me to go to the British Museum and find information. Right? Like, I mean, of course, there's always the danger that it cooked up some information, but over time, like if you ask it 10 different ways the same question, you will know what is cooked up and what isn't. Like even if you don't know anything about that. So I think, yeah, this is the second level of Copilot AI that will be very useful in education. Like I encourage students to learn about writing code, technical concepts in this way, like, or like upload the code that I do in class, let's say, and feed it to ChatGPT and ask it questions like, what does this function do and what does that function do? Like, what is the so use ChatGPT as a way to walk through the code, and so I encourage students to do that all the time. Like upload stuff, ask it questions, then you will learn, or upload data like the I recently uploaded the IPCC climate change report 6, like, and then asked it questions as to like, what are the principles of climate change that has been worked on in the report, like, or that form the basis for the report, and how important is the carbon measures, and so on. I mean, I learned a lot on like just by asking the questions, and so just a few afternoons of quizzing ChatGPT was already made me a lot more aware than I would have otherwise been able to. Right, like otherwise I would have to like kind of believe the experts. Like, I mean, of course, we should believe experts, but we should also be skeptical of equally skeptical of everybody and every piece of knowledge, which is the fundamental essence of science. So yeah, I think all in all, it's going to be very positive. And I also teach a seminar. Like I've noticed the writing has improved just in the last year or so. Maybe some of it is copy pasted, like, but in general, I think like the quality of investigation could improve. I mean, of course, there can be garbage things that come out, but yeah, those unethical things about attribution and copyright protection, all of these things important. Like, but overall, I think it would be a net positive. Yeah.
Got it. And so you have like mastered like various other disciplines from fabrication, PhD, game engine, AI. What is a course you think would be beneficial to 22-year-old Sajay right now? What would you have appreciated?
I yeah, I mean, I think like I wouldn't say I've mastered anything other than like a long-term interest in geometry, right? Like, and that's the lens through which I view everything else. Like, and so for example, even with AI, like the way some of the things I understand is through simple linear algebra, which I had learned it in the context of form finding or like some kind of geometry processing context, meaning in a very visual context. Like, so when I see like a lot of matrix algebra like being demonstrated in an AI setting, like I know when you multiply two things, it just moves a point from one, like it just transforms a point into a different space. Like, and so visually, that I have that map, and I still think that has served me super well, like foundational interest. in geometry, regardless of software, right? Like, because software come and go, and first principles always super important. Like, and particularly when you're in the younger years, like where you can invest a lot of hours of experimenting and failing. Like, that's where we want to, fail our way upwards. Like, and so I think, yeah, fundamental knowledge of any kind is things that won't go away even if the software changes, right? Or
Mm.
even if the new trend comes along. Like, you're not going to abandon that. Like, you're going to absorb the new trend within the lens of your previous foundational knowledge. And yeah, I mean, to many people, I'm already a bit scatterbrained. Like, but like, from an internal perspective, I think, like, I feel cohesive enough, like, from a because I understand things from a geometry perspective. Like, always been interested in computer graphics, computer geometry. So yeah, video games, natural alignment with that, and robotic fabrication, also very natural alignment. Like, and AI by itself is not very naturally aligned. I mean, this kind of text to image, text to text prompting is not so aligned, but like, some of the math is useful to know in another context. And also, doing a PhD it might be about one specific topic. Like, in my case, it was about 3D concrete printing and shape design related to that. But like, you also learn the method of argumentation, and scientific inquiry, and rational looking at all sides of the same of the argument, and literature review. All of these little skills that you build up doing a PhD helps you assimilate new information somewhat quicker, right? Like, so when I look at Q learning or something, like, I've kind of seen something similar in a geometry processing world. And so it's not, so it's not immediately scary symbols. the which So I would still recommend, like, spending time learning a foundational topic, even if it is not in vogue, particularly if it's not in vogue. Like, it's very useful. Like, I mean, I've seen, like, discrete geometry, like people like Keenan Crane and Olga Sorkin and so on. Like, they've dedicated their lives to that topic. And so when AI comes along, they don't just abandon that. They just make, uh, like, they bring that geometric knowledge, and, like, try to look at geometric deep learning, or like, or making convolution faster, or with less, or give it a, geometric intuition, and so on. And like, that's so, for example, even the head of Twitter, for example, machine learning, who was a professor in computer graph in from Israel, and then in Imperial, is called Michael Bronstein. Like, his background is in, like, applied math, or maybe pure math, but in a computer graphics way. Like, that's how I knew him from 15-20 years ago. But now, and then he also had some part to play in the invention of Kinect, or the predecessor from Prime Sense. And then he also made some inventions for the Twitter algorithm. So I think these, so the foundational knowledge is always, and then you find resonances and applications. Like, as another example of that is Philippe Bloch himself. Like, when his PhD was on reinforced masonry, stone construction, and at that time, like, people were asking, why are you interested in 400-year-old things? Like, and over time, because he stuck with it, like, it became relevant to more and more things. Like, and so, and it also helps you find friends and collaborators once you have a conviction about something, right? That. Yeah, so I would definitely encourage like myself. I mean, I still continue to believe that, like that, we should, yeah, stick to a foundational layer. But as you grow older, like the your time availability to dedicate becomes fragmented, and and so yeah, so it's harder to do kind of focus things. So yeah, at the younger age, I would say that's what everybody should be doing, whatever is the topic, even if it's AI. Like,
Yeah, that's a great advice, like first principle thinking. Was there any like year which was like super like like pivotal, or like your thinking changed drastically?
yeah, I mean, I think every 3 4 years something like that does happen, right? Like, I mean, in 2007 I joined Zaha, and like I was just interested in these things, like Maya and design and meshes and like form finding and so on. And the book came out, Architectural Geometry, by Helmut Portman, came out in 2007, and it was like fascinating. Like, I mean, I understand zero words and none of the symbols, but then it became so interesting that like I wanted to learn more of that, and then I started reading. Like at that time, there was this open OCW in MIT about some simple linear algebra basics, basics of calculus and so on, which I relearned. And so around 2011, 2012, I mean, 2010, I already met Philippe, but then 2011, 2012, we started making these workshops and building prototypes. Like, so 2012 was quite a pivotal in that sense, like a lot of things consolidated. And similarly, 4 more years later, like 2016 was, early. Zaha passed away, but at the end of 2016, we also completed the first commercial project, which is the Science Museum, where it's not, a lot of these ideas became applied, like for the bench, hot wire cut bench, or like this fabric structure in the middle of like a small gallery. And yeah, so 2016 was pivotal, 2020 was pivotal, COVID happened, like, but like our company grew by maybe 30 40%. And then yeah, and then we started doing these stadiums like all remotely. And then because I mean the only way we were able to do that is because we had accrued all of this uh, custom geometry processing workflows, like and then so we managed to do large scale stadiums with a small team collaborating between London and China and so on. But I was at the same time, 2022 Striatus happened, 2021 Striatus happened, and then 2022, 23 Phoenix happened, which is the second version of Striatus, like the concrete printed unreinforced masonry footbridge. And yeah, so I think it seems to be a 3 4 year cycle of like maturation, like yeah, things just seem to take that time. Like in 2020, we also started the Honduras kind of participatory game based on um, experimental project. It's still not physically materialized, but it's perhaps one of the more famous unbuilt works from the code group. And yeah, so I think it's there's never a dull moment, let's say, and it's not like something suddenly happens. It just seems to hit some milestones every 3 4 years. Yeah.
So which means like after 2020, 2024 is your third or fourth year for the pivot.
Yeah, yeah, possibly. Maybe we're
I
due
see.
for some other maturation to happen. Yeah. Mhm.
I see.
I
And so,
mean, it perhaps would happen because, in a way, like now, post COVID, like cities are returning to but they're not obviously exactly the same as before COVID. So there's economies are changing, and there's elections everywhere in the world. Like so, yeah, most likely it's quite some seminal shift could happen. Yeah.
Mm. Is there anything you wish you would have done differently in your career and life?
Well, not really. I mean, I think just I feel that like I'm more like in chess there is like people who are like positionally good and like others who are very good at like having a planned opening and so on. Like so, I'm more like that positional. Like so, whatever things comes along, like if it's of interest, I gravitate towards that, and so it's hard to imagine something that I really wanted to do and I haven't. But I do feel fortunate for all of these kind of influential events that happened. Like almost everything, a lot of things that have had a deep influence on my life and career almost always happen through chance. Like I, like even though I studied in the DRL, Patrick was on sabbatical like on that year, so I didn't meet Patrick like during my studies in the DRL, and then I happened to meet Patrick randomly in an AA party once, and but my friends already recommended me to him, and I was planning to go back to India, and then he offered me a job, and then I took that. And also Philippe Bloch, like I again randomly met on a fateful Sunday in London because Alicia, my wife, like found this pamphlet and she said this looks interesting, like we should go to Imperial College, and it was on a Sunday. We were walking around, and no, I didn't know who Philippe was, or like. And yeah, and a few years later, he was my PhD advisor. Yeah, and I also met Alicia in a similarly random way, and so yeah, and then also my brother now works with on the same team, and he has his own career that's growing, and it's also kind of fortunate in that way, like that he happens to be in the same realm, and then a lot of the students like from DRL were my students and then became part of Code, and like they're making their own career, some making their startups and so on. Like I think this is all very kind of both fortunate, but also because we're in one same similar realms, like it seems to anyway happen, like it might not exactly have taken this form, like but in general it seems like something or the other similar would have happened like that. And so yeah, so there's not much that I feel that I should have done differently, like but I do feel that every time I through these circumstantial things that have happened, like I've improved my ability, or let's say like a kind of AI, to recognize people who might make a significant
Mm,
shift, right? Like it's a kind of learned thing, like if like to know the Patricks of the world, like um, that or Philippe, or like a lot of the collaborators, like when you first meet them, they will be not as famous as they eventually turn out to be. And so yeah, like I think maybe that's, so I wouldn't do anything different, like maybe if anything, like I would take more risks
I see.
than I have so far taken. Yeah.
Are there any like problems or things you wish you could work if you had more time?
Yeah, not again, not so much, because yeah, like I mean, I think architecture has been very is as my father rightly predicted, was has been the singular most important event that somehow has led to everything else, right? That like the architectural education per se, like, and I think that allowed me to read a lot, like early on, like, you know, when I was 16, 18 years old, like, um, and meet to know that like you have to be collaborative to make any impact in the world, right? Like, and that was fundamentally very clear to me, or even in my undergraduate education, because a group of friends, like, you know, I was good at writing and reading, and like others were good at model making. So even though the projects were individual, like we would just share these tasks. So I would write other people's essays, and, you know, and people would make my model, kind of thing, like, and so, or help me make it. And so it's, so I think like that has been yeah, very foundational, like, that I feel everything has to, will take time, but eventually it will happen. Like if you're good and if you're sincere, like, you know, one way or the other, you know, you will be rewarded. Like, and it's, so I generally don't have any fear of missing out on things, or like, you know, I'm very quite satisfied. I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm very happy with, like, proud of like achievements, but I do feel that like eventually I will get somewhere, because I just, because I'm interested, and I will meet the relevant people, like, and again, been very fortunate that I'm, you know, happen to be in the right place at the right time in London. And but yeah, if I was maybe in another city, like, maybe things would have been different. But I still feel that like the broad educational basis that like my undergrad education in India gave me was, because that school unfortunately is now shut down because it got into political trouble with, because nobody likes experimental pedagogy. And so, or people who ask difficult questions, you know, always get into trouble. So it's unfortunate, but I feel that school called TVB, School of Habitat Studies, was like one of the best things that happened to Indian architectural education. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Shajay, is there anything which we didn't cover in this interview and would like to share your thoughts on those areas, or food for thoughts for people who are passionate about technology, AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I mean, yeah, I don't have advice, but like I'd say like the way I think about it myself, that architecture like can genuinely influence a lot of users, like, and so we we should take our profession as seriously and as it used to be, you know, because 20th century cities and 20th century architecture is maybe not as um, memorable as previous centuries of cities, and buildings, like in on average, like, and so and we generally, I generally believe that like cities are the way to make our profession have its, take its rightful position in contributing value to society, because um, urbanization is happening anyway, and so buildings and cities that contribute to well-being of and prosperity, and like, you know, wealth, but also um, you know, general happiness and healthy living of, so we could have deep impact on, you know, millions of people, like, and yeah, so we should take that as a sense of pride, but also a sense of responsibility.
Such a great way to end on an inspiring note. As usual, it's lovely and inspiring to host you, Sajay. I'll always look forward what you are working on, your research and experiments. So thanks a lot for sharing all the stories. It
Sure.
means a lot.
Thanks for the chat, Mayor, and
Yeah.
good luck with your upcoming